Hello, my name is Rob.
And I'm Rob.
And welcome to Impossible Mission, the Geek Show's video game series, either video or podcast, which talks about video games. Lots of videos in that sentence there. And if you're watching on YouTube, click like, click subscribe, comment below with your additions to the conversation, which is a continuation of last week. Or if you're listening on the podcast, do subscribe, share us with your friends, follow us on social media. There'll be links in the show notes. But last week we talked about games we'd like to see return, dead franchises. Maybe it's for next gen, maybe it's just for whenever. It's just games we want to see come back from the void.
Yeah, but not simply a remastered version of the original game. An actual remake in the style of Resident Evil and Final Fantasy VII and games like that.
I remember the very early HD remasters. I remember the Silent Hill one. Was it on PlayStation 3?
Yeah.
Which was awful.
Yeah. Right, so I went first last time, so I think you should go first this time.
Just in case you missed the first part, what did you do last time? What did you cover last time?
What did I cover? Well, if you want to know, you can always watch the previous episode. But if you don't have the time, here it is. I chose for my first three, Parasite Eve, Power Stone, and Siphon Filter.
Yeah, so my first three, I had SSX, Dead Space, and F-Zero. Eclectic mix. Well, you went first last time, so we may as well keep it consistent.
So me first, then.
You first.
Alright, okay. Since you're forcing me, you're twisting my arm, I'm going to go with another fighting game, right? But this one was so very, very, very different.
Okay.
Bushido Blade.
That's one of those PlayStation 1... It's like Siphon Filter from last episode. It's just one of those names which is just bouncing around in my memory.
Right. Bushido Blade was different from pretty much every other fighting game. It kind of reminded me a little bit of a classic martial arts game from the Commodore Amiga era called Budokan. In certain ways, it reminded me of that. In other ways, it was basically the fighting game that I would love to see now. I would love to see it on a next-gen console. I'd love to see what they do with it, keeping some of the original mechanics. And see, the whole thing was, this was developed by Lightweight, and it was published by Square, right? By Squaresoft at the time. And Bushido Blade was different because they were one-on-one third-person battles, but the difference between other fighting games was that you didn't have any time limit or health gauge, and the fact that you don't have a health gauge makes it a little bit like Victorious Boxers in that respect.
So you got to judge the mannerisms and body language of your opponent.
Instead. The majority of hits would cause instant death, right? Whereas in normal fighting games you have a health gauge, but in this you're basically armed with swords and spears and stuff like that. And if you hit someone just right, you could basically kill them outright. It was possible to wound an opponent without killing them, and you also had this you had this thing called a body damage system, so you could physically disable each other in increments. A bit like, but the other thing was, you had like 8 weapons to choose from: katana, nodachi, longsword, saber, broadsword, naginata, rapier, and sledgehammer. But here's the
sledgehammer.
Yep, sledgehammer. Sledgehammer is basically a weapon of war as well. But here's the thing, right? Even though each weapon had a realistic-ish weight, length, that sort of thing. One of the things you could do during the fight, see, it was all about Bushido, it was all about honor during combat. And I think For Honor is kind of following on a little bit from Bushido Blade.
It seems a bit more arcadey.
For Honor is more of an arena combat thing. This is basically one-on-one. And what I'd love to see is this version of Bushido Blade come back, because one of the things you could do, you could literally throw dirt in your opponent's eyes.
You see, everything you've said, it points to one of the big holes in the fighting game market, because it's all very arcade.
Yeah.
Whether that's hyper-gore or cartoony, over embellishments and excess. But honest to God, realism isn't really in the fighting game space.
Yeah.
That's a game that could fill it.
Yeah, but the thing is, some of the characters have like a sub-weapon you could throw. You had a choice of 6 playable characters, and each one had like different levels of strength, speed, that sort of thing. And everyone had their own special attacks. The story mode, though, was where you could do certain things. Certain moves and certain tactics were considered dishonorable, like throwing dirt in your opponent's eyes, striking a foe from the back, stuff like that, right? Or because before the fights they bow to each other. If you attack while they're bowing, right, that's also dishonorable, and that actually affected how the story progressed.
That's interesting.
So that was another interesting addition to it.
How many games did it have?
If I remember rightly, there was only was it just the one game? I can't remember.
I definitely remember Bushido Blade.
Yeah, I think it was just the one game.
That's a disappointment. I think maybe the time might be right for it now, because there is like a case with all of these games that they were just the right game at the wrong time.
Well, I mean, there was a second game.
But still, that point still stands. There is a case with these things that it is the wrong game, or the right game at the wrong time.
Yeah, but the thing is, there was actually something that came out later on that was related to Bushido Blade. And it was also developed by Lightweight, and it came out on the PlayStation 2. Do you remember Kengo Master of Bushido?
Not really.
Right. Kengo Master of Bushido was kind of a related title. It had similar gameplay to Bushido Blade. And I think Kengo kind of developed into... it kind of evolved in a little bit into games like Way of the Samurai.
Oh yeah, I remember Way of the Samurai. I really enjoyed that franchise. It wasn't very good, but I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Yes, so I pick up that baton, and it's actually connected in a funny way.
Really?
Yes. Currently, Team Ninja are working on their critically acclaimed Neo series, which is sort of an Onimusha take on the Dark Souls Bloodborne formula of incredibly hard, incredibly punishing, sort of finding the pattern of the bosses and beating them even though they can off you in one shot, collecting souls, yada yada yada. I can recite all the tropes. But as far as the ones which aren't done by From Software, Neo is one of the better ones.
Yeah.
But what they got their name from was Ninja Gaiden.
Yep.
Ninja Gaiden Black was the original on... Was it the original Xbox or was it the 360?
Well, Ninja Gaiden Black wasn't the original. The original was...
No, I mean, there's original, but the original of the second wave.
Yeah. See, Ninja Gaiden Black was basically the ultimate version of that Ninja Gaiden. And I think it was on the Xbox One was Ninja Gaiden Black, because you couldn't get it on PS3.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I mean... Its story was about Ryu Hayabusa, and he had a series of buxom kunoichis, or female ninjas, and he went to fight a monster man who was doing monster man things, which is fine, I guess. But it's the type of game which Devil May Cry or Bayonetta is. Mm. However, its combat is some of the... it got chills. It's some of the best...
Ninja Gaiden is probably... See, Ninja Gaiden is... wasn't it originally like a platform game?
Yeah, it was like a 2D... I think Shinobi was of a similar ilk as Ninja Gaiden was.
But Shinobi got a remake on the PS3. The PS2.
Yeah, it wasn't a good remake.
It wasn't a good remake, but
there's a history for Ninja Gaiden to come back, because it already has once. But its combat was so good. It's like some of the greatest combat that's ever been put in a game.
I'm trying to think. All those things that people love about games like Devil May Cry and Bayonetta, I think Ninja Gaiden basically did better.
I think it went to number 3. Number 3 was a rubbish game, but still, that combat.
Yeah.
It was so buttery, beautiful stuff. And I think, it's fine that Team Ninja are doing Neo. It's working for them. It's probably more successful than Ninja Gaiden was. But at the same time, Ninja Gaiden is it's some of the best combat that I've ever played. And I can't really make a better case for something to return than having some of the best stuff that I've ever played.
I've got to ask a question, right? Ninja Gaiden, right?
It wasn't as good when you were playing as a female ninja. Just to stress that. But when you were playing Ryu, it was... Whoa, chills. But go on, your question.
My question is, Ninja Gaiden is developed by Team Ninja, yeah?
Yes.
So, how the hell... who's the developer of Dead or Alive?
Yeah, it's a very complicated company, that one, isn't it?
Tecmo, isn't it?
Yeah, because Tecmo, it's all under Tecmo. Team Ninja is a part of Tecmo.
Yeah, but,
and Dead or Alive is also done within a different wing of Tecmo.
Oh, should I say Koei Tecmo, as they are
That's
now.
what they're called now, yeah.
Yeah. So, because Ryu Hayabusa appears in Dead or Alive.
That's where he started life, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think...
Well, no, he didn't. He started originally in the original Ninja Gaiden.
Yeah,
he
but
was
then...
3D'ized in Dead or Alive, and then he got his own game.
Yeah, and it's always seemed puzzling to me that Ryu has his own game, but the rest of the characters in Dead or Alive don't.
It's actually, as far as games characters having their own franchise, it's probably the most successful. Because I remember, what was that, Nina from Tekken had that Death by Degrees, which is awful. And beyond that, I can't remember any.
I'll tell you something, right? I know Death by Degrees gets slated a lot of the time by everybody, and in some ways, rightly so. But, right? And I've always felt that this is truly...
Nina Williams, that's what was her name, yeah. Nina Williams.
I've always felt that this is truly a shame. The fact that nobody ever took the actual control mechanics for the game, the actual fighting control mechanics, and tried to do something with that, because the control mechanics were really interesting. And if somebody out there looked at Death by Degrees and thought, hang on, because I did, and if I was a games developer, I'd be looking at those control mechanics and saying, hang on, so you're using the twin sticks for all of this, for movement and combat, right? And you can basically, if you include the trigger buttons with the twin sticks, then what you have, if you can basically get the animations and get the coding right, you could have possibly the most flowing combat in a fighting game that's ever been made.
Yeah, that goes back to what I said earlier, though, wasn't it? Wrong game, no, right game, wrong time.
Yeah, I think that particular control mechanic is something that really people should be looking at now, as just because if you think about it, if you don't need to button mash, if you don't need to move and button mash and stuff like that, but you could use the twin sticks instead, you've got a lot more flexibility. The twin sticks move, yeah. But then you could use the two trigger buttons and your third finger, right, your ring finger on both hands, for buttons, because people have those triggers underneath now, don't they?
Yeah, once upon a time, the first-person shooter wasn't done with twin sticks. There was a time before that.
Yeah, but now
and it revolutionised the genre. So who says this couldn't do the same for fighting games?
And that's why I'm saying.
Interesting gambit there. A very interesting gambit.
So anyway, moving on to.
But that was Ninja Gaiden. Yeah. Bring back Ninja Gaiden. It rocks.
My next choice, and I had to go with it. It's a game that unfortunately got overshadowed by a lot of the other JRPGs of the PlayStation 1 era. It came out in 1999, unfortunately, so it was towards the end of the life of the PlayStation, and that's the truly tragic thing about this game, because it is a great game. It had some amazing graphics. It's just sad that this... And Sony have the rights to this. Again, Sony, you have the rights to this. Bring back a remake, a totally new envisioning of The Legend of Dragoon.
This is the all too common tale of this era of JRPG, because the PlayStation 1 is the best JRPGs have ever been. And there were so many of them.
Wow, you say that, but...
It was the tail end of how the best it has ever been.
Yeah.
I'd say sort of like SNES to PlayStation 1. That sort of window was JRPGs with a biz.
You had so many good ones. There wasn't just the Final Fantasies. There was Sakura Taisen. There was Legend of Dragoon. You had Grandia. You had Jade Cocoon. You had Arc the Lad, Chrono Trigger, Chrono Cross, Xenogears.
PlayStation 2 was good and all, but it just wasn't that.
Yeah. But Legend of Dragoon, you take on the role of Dart, the protagonist. He's heading home from a 5-year-long journey to pursue a black monster that killed his parents and destroyed his home city of Neat, which is also spelled the way you think it's spelled. It is spelled Neet, which I always found hilarious, because Neat...
Was that an in-joke?
I think it was an in-joke, because NEET literally means not in education, employment, or training.
Which probably is the biggest audience for these games.
But anyway,
I say that with all the love in the world, by the way.
Yeah. The thing I loved about The Legend of Dragoon is that you basically were immersed in this story, and it was 4 discs. It was expansive, and yeah, okay, the storyline was a little bit clunky in parts, but hell, what storyline for a JRPG wasn't clunky in parts for that time?
Well, show me any game which is over 50 hours where the game, well, the story even, doesn't get clunky at some point. It just doesn't exist. There is no game
exactly
like that. It just doesn't happen.
It was a beautiful game for the PlayStation 1. Beautiful game for the PlayStation 1, right?
And not Panzer Dragoon, so just let's make that stress. It's not the one where you ride dragons.
Yeah, but
that was a Sega game.
I would love to see a remake of Legend of Dragoon, and I think that the time is ripe for a remake of Legend of Dragoon.
Yeah, my last one is another one of these, if you know me, I'm never more than 30 minutes from discussing it or boring people about it, whichever way you want to look at it. And it is Timesplitters. It was put up by Free Radical, and I believe Free Radical were consumed into Crytek, who do Crysis.
Yeah.
Anyway, it had a story for Timesplitters. It was Timesplitters 1, Timesplitters 2, and Timesplitters Future Perfect. It was a game mostly built around the multiplayer. It was brilliant multiplayer. The thing which made it is kind of a precursor to Overwatch. Very, very characterful multiplayer game in which you could play things as diverse as butlers to monkeys to all sorts, really. Dinosaurs, time travelers, because that's the whole thing. Timesplitters, the concept is you are people from all sorts of eras of time throughout history, and you all jumped in a multiplayer arena and shot some guns. And there's not much more we can really say about it, to be honest, but I think as far as the way the landscape is and the environment of the character shooter, well, I don't know whether it wouldn't have been, but it certainly led the way for Fortnite and Overwatch, Timesplitters.
Yeah.
And it's just incredibly fun to have a game where you can say to your friends, you can't play as the monkey because the monkey is cheating. And you have them sort of like game rules, like unspoken rules of being a part of this multiplayer community, which is very, very eccentric and very unique and very smooth gameplay. Because I believe some of the people who worked on it worked on the shooters for Rare in the N64, so like GoldenEye and Perfect Dark. So as far as of that era shooters, it was one of the best, absolute best. But unlike what shooters have become, divorcing like those ones I mentioned earlier, Overwatch and Fortnite, sorry. Most shooters now are super serious.
Yeah.
This isn't, and it led the way for the colourful ones. And I can't really... I'm repeating the same point now, but I think it's just the time might be right to bring it back. There was talk about it coming back a while ago, but that died down. But still, I think there's never a bad time to bring it back, because it's just one of those evergreen titles, basically.
Yeah. So, my last one then, yeah? So, I'm going to go far, far back into the depths of time, into the mists of PC and Amiga and SNES and Sega gaming, and even the 3DO. And I'm going to go back to a war that was fought across the stars between the humans and the Kilrathi.
No idea.
Origin Systems came up with a game, right, back in, I think it was 1990, on the and it was released for MS-DOS, and it was a game that would literally change the entire shape of space combat games, right? It would change it all, because up until then you had games like Elite and stuff like that, and the game that Origin Systems released was Wing Commander.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, Wing Commander, quite literally, right, what it did, it forced LucasArts to change their Star Wars games and to actually give them a new look. So that's how you ended up with, like, the X-Wing games and the TIE Fighter games, right, from LucasArts.
They don't make them anymore, do they?
No, they don't. Wing Commander is basically a dead franchise, and I would love to see Wing Commander make a return, because the original Wing Commander games were, for the time, amazing. You basically had right? And this was the cockpit view. The cockpit was basically, in Battlestar Galactica, where you have where you saw the flight stick and everything like that. The cockpit was basically flight stick, and you had these big areas where you had your radar and you had your weapon systems and stuff like that, and you had just these windows that you could look out of. So you had a very narrow field of view. It wasn't like a first-person view, which a lot of the games tend to go with now. And
Like Gears Combat, yeah.
Yeah, and I always thought having that narrow field of view added a lot more tension to it because you couldn't see below you. You had to use your radar. You had to use your sensors. You had to be aware.
Dark Soulsing this?
I'm not Dark Soulsing this. I'm saying that why would a Dark Souls game that was already tough to play long before Dark Souls?
No, you know what I mean. Like the difficulty is why people love Dark Souls, and you're saying the same for that. That's all. I'm just drawing a weird coming out of there.
I'm sorry, but as an older gamer, I think that that argument is stupid.
Okay.
And I'm saying that and spelling stupid as in STOOPID, just for emphasis, right?
It's not the hardest game I've ever played. That's still Ghouls and Ghosts.
Yeah, it's seriously. The reason for a game to be popular is because it's difficult. Get over yourself.
Let's move past that. I was just baiting you.
Yes, and successfully as well. Look, Wing Commander is one of those games where, if I remember rightly, Wing Commander had you had Wing Commander and then the Secret Missions, which was kind of an expansion. Then you had Wing Commander 2 and Wing Commander 3 and even Wing Commander 4, which came out in 1996, right? Wing Commander 3 was one of my favorites because it was basically Privateer, and it was you were basically like that was the Han Solo game.
Oh well, there you go. Yeah.
That's why that was my favourite, and that was from 1993. But Wing Commander, I think the final nail in the coffin for Wing Commander was when they did that stupid movie with Freddie Prinze Jr.
That'd kill any franchise.
But, that was in the past. That's happened. We don't talk about that. Moving on to actual Wing Commander itself. Oh, and I forgot Super Wing Commander, which was a drastic new look at the events of the original Wing Commander, which came out on the 3DO. Yeah.
I mean, given that EA have discovered that Star Wars games can be successful if you actually put effort in.
Yeah.
Who knows? This might be one they want to pull back out. Along with Knights of the Old Republic, maybe.
Well, the reason why I'm saying Wing Commander, right? See, this is the thing. Elite has a remake, right? They've done a new game called Elite Dangerous, which is actually pretty good. In fact, pretty amazing, I'll be honest. Elite Dangerous is very, very good. And if they can do that with Elite, think of what they can do with all of the wealth of material that they've got for Wing Commander. Because let's be fair, Elite and Elite 2 weren't the most high-end games. Wireframe graphics, a randomized planetary system, and it was basically the granddaddy of all space games, right? Wing Commander 2 has all of this stuff already there to build on.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, and I bet all of the viewers did not expect Wing Commander to make it to this list.
I didn't, to be honest. But it's nice that it did.
Yeah, we've got some honorary mentions, though.
Yes, I'll run through mine first.
Okay.
Shin Megami Tensei.
Okay, which one?
Otherwise known as Mega 10, because that's Persona made a lot of money for that company, and Shin Megami is what they did before Persona, or during Persona as well.
Right, yeah.
And Persona 4 and 5 have been so incredibly successful that I think it's afforded them the opportunity to sort of dust off a few of their old Shin Megami games.
Because I thought all of these were actually part of Shin Megami Tensei. I thought the franchise
but
was
they kind of dropped that, haven't they? They've dropped the Shin Megami Tensei thing, and it's just...
right.
Klonoa, which is a very popular with many people.
Good call.
2D platformer with bubble mechanics.
Good call.
Ape Escape.
Ape Escape?
Ape Escape.
Really?
It's just one of those dumb arcade games, isn't it, where it has no hook, you just go and catch some apes that have escaped.
I have to be honest, I did not expect you to say Ape Escape.
It's just fun. It's just pure, non-pretentious fun.
Yeah.
Onimusha, which I was completely swung by the reissue of the first one. I thought that was sort of like the precursor to them doing the new one.
Yeah.
Maybe it is. Either it isn't. Either way, I want to see Onimusha back. The one fighting franchise that I got behind ever was Bloody Raw, in which it was just the 2D, sort of 3D model fighter in which you fought with other people, but you had like a beast mode in which you turned into a very exaggerated animal and you fought each other. I think there was 3 of them. It was on PlayStation 1. Probably wasn't that successful because it just went away, but I adored it and I would love to see that back because it could pull me back into fighting games.
Yeah.
And the last one is probably not going to ever happen because it was owned by Midway and it was one boxing game that I adored and it was very arcade and very fun, but Ready to Rumble.
Yes.
And there's something I'd like to see back. I could probably have about 40 of these things because there's been so many games that went away, but these are the ones that really stick out for me.
I think Ready to Rumble, I think that's a really good choice. I would love to see that game make a comeback. For me, right at the top of my honourable mentions, and I had to take it off the list because I thought Wing Commander was more important and more worth. Not that it's more worthy of a remake, but more due a remake. Because this game had a remastered version that came out on the GameCube, Skies of Arcadia. I would love to see a new version of Skies of Arcadia, if possible. And on the back of that, games like Chrono Trigger and Chrono Cross, I'd love to see remakes of those. One game that I would love to see them just totally redo and revamp and remake, and I know it had a remastered version that came out on iOS in 2009, and there were plans for a sequel. That was supposed to come out on Apple Arcade last year, but still has no release date. At the time of this recording anyway, Beneath the Steel Sky.
Yes.
Now, I can't impress upon you just how good a point-and-click adventure this game is. I mean, we're talking 1994, cyberpunk, science fiction, point-and-click, developed by Revolution Software, and it's now, right, you can get this game for free on GOG.com, right? So if you want to play it, go to GOG.com, download it for your PC, play the game. You will not regret playing this game. And you will join me in wanting a remake of this game because the game has the world is so rife for exploration. It's the kind of world that Deus Ex built later on. It's that kind of world, that kind of environment that Deus Ex built as well. And you could see very easily Beneath the Steel Sky and Deus Ex kind of overlapping in certain ways.
That's interesting.
You know, Beneath the Steel Sky is one of those games where you just go, "That's amazing." I did not expect to enjoy myself as much as this. Penultimate one that I'd love to see a remake of is a classic sword and sorcery fighting action game, Gauntlet.
There's another icon of games of yonder.
Because Gauntlet did have a couple of games that came out on the PlayStation 2, which weren't very good. But I think Gauntlet is one of those games where I don't think it'd get old. I think
it's evergreen.
I think Gauntlet actually might have had a game on the PC in the last few years. I'm not sure. Possibly. And if it did, then, don't stress. I can't remember if it did, but Gauntlet Legends is the one that I'm actually specifically focusing on here. And the last one, and I'm going to go back to horror. These games came out on the PlayStation 1 and also on the Dreamcast for the second game, right? Nightmare Creatures.
I thought you were going to go with, for a moment, the one survival horror that Nintendo did. But no, that's not one that I've heard of.
Which survival horror did Nintendo do?
I shall look it up while you're talking.
Right. Nightmare Creatures is... it's more of an action-oriented game than Resident Evil and things like that, right? It's basically gothic horror, right? And it's set in... the story begins in 1666. Devil-worshipping cult called the Brotherhood of Hecate conducting sinister experiments in London and take over the city. And so you have to roam the streets of London fighting against these superhuman powers and... basically, it's grotesque monsters, and it ends up in the First Great Fire of London. Then the game itself takes place in 1834. This is after London has fallen victim to several evil occurrences, and you basically have to go around. It's a single-player game, and you take control of one or two characters, either Ignatius or Nadia. Nightmare Creatures is one of those bizarre games that you don't expect it to be as good as it is, but it is as good as it is.
I remember those days when you had those stealth classics.
Yeah, because this game came out on the PlayStation, the PC, N64. I think it was re-released for mobile as well. But Nightmare Creatures 2 was the one where it really kind of took off its clothes and ran around naked and said, "Look at me."
It did a Suda 51, did it?
Yeah.
But that sounds good. The Nintendo first survival horror that I was trying to think of was Eternal Darkness.
Oh, Santi's Requiem. Yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought you were going to mention.
Well, actually, see, I forgot about that one, but Eternal Darkness could do with the remake as well.
Yeah.
Damn it. There's far too many games. We'll have to revisit this at some point in the future.
Just look through Nintendo's archive of things that this didn't and just dropped, because there's some amazing stuff in there. Some amazing stuff. But anyway, that is it for this double episode of Impossible Mission. I hope this sort of thing is helping with the self-isolation. But until next time, thank you for listening, or thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.